ask them to put us on live stream, please.
We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. Right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. Special welcome to Grant again this evening. Welcome to the meeting, Grant, and to your colleague, William, who I believe is the first time he's ever attended Nuneaton, a meeting at Nuneaton and Bedworth. So if we could move to the meeting procedure. As you are aware, the meeting is being live streamed. The public participation in the meeting will be orally or by submitted statement, which the legal officer will read out. We will deal with those items on the agenda first, where we have public participation. I'm not aware that we have any, do we, Victoria?
No, Councillor, just councillors requesting to speak.
Thank you. Can I ask all attendees, other than myself, set their microphones to mute and unmute your microphone when you're invited by myself to do so. And if you wish to speak, click on the hand item and I will take them in order as they appear on the screen. And then please remember to switch your hand icon off. If there are any voting, the legal officer will read out the names of the committee members in alphabetical order. And please unmute your microphone when you hear your name called and respond with for, against or abstain. And after the vote has been taken, the legal officer will then announce the rest of the vote. So if we could move to the first item, which is announcements. I have already welcomed Grant and William to the meeting. So I will move. I don't have any announcements other than that. So can I move to item 2, apologies? I don't think we have apologies from Councillor Elliott, substituted by Councillor Rudkin, from Councillor Daffin, substituted by Councillor Doughty, and Councillor Tromans, substituted by Councillor Guttridge, and Councillor Andy Sargent, substituted by Councillor Jane Sargent. Is anyone aware of any further apologies?
No, Chair.
No. Okay, thank you. So item 3 are the minutes of the previous meeting. You have them there. Is it agreed that they are true record of the meeting? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to question the accuracy of the minutes, but I do have a question in relation to minute ASC29A, which can be found on page 6. The leader of the council will be invited to consider the request that the shadow leader of the council or their substitute be allowed to attend cabinet meetings as described in the report, and subject to the approval of the above, it be recommended to council that the constitution be amended accordingly. And as chair of the committee, could you please give us an update on whether the leader of the council has considered our recommendation and whether she's got back to you as chair of the committee?
I haven't received any information. Mr. Richardson, can you help out with that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can. Yes, the leader of the council has been consulted on that and has agreed. So there will be a report going to the next council.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Are there anything further from the minutes that anyone may want to raise? I see no one else putting their hand up. So if we could then, I will therefore propose
Chair,
that.
Councillor Pomfret has his hand up.
Sorry.
Chair, could members of the committee be asked to make sure their cameras are switched off, please? Thank you.
Why is yours on then?
I switched off, Gwyn, did you say?
Yes, please. Yes, one. I can see one other councillor on the screen apart from yourself.
Right. There is a request that members please switch. I think that might be you, Keith. Can you switch your camera off for now, please? Can you hear me, Keith?
Apologies, Chair, button problems.
Okay, okay. When you're ready, can you switch it off, please? Moving then on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 4, which are the declarations of interest. Does anyone have any? Sorry, Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Gutteridge.
With my hand signals.
Councillor Gutteridge, yes. Right. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It's regarding personal interest as non-executive director with the Nuneaton and Bedworth Community Enterprise Limited. It still needs removing, Chair.
Can we arrange for that to be done, please, Victoria?
Yeah, I'm making a note of that now, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further items of declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. So then moving on to item 5, public consultation. I've had Councillor Kondarka wishes to speak on item 6, item 9, 10 and 13. On item 15, Councillor Kondarka, Councillor Kay Brindley-Edwards, Councillor Tromans and Councillor Golby. On item 16, Councillor Condacourt, Councillor Tromans and Councillor Golby, and item 17, Councillor Golby. We will take the speakers as we get to each individual item. So agenda item 6 is the updated audit findings report from our external auditor. Grant, I think you're in the chair now.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure whether does the councillor speak ahead of me or after me. Sorry, just in terms of.
I think the hand has gone down, Councillor Grant.
Okay, right. Right, thank you, Chair. So just for members of the committee and maybe if anyone's live streaming, my name is Grant Patterson. I'm a director with Grant Thornton and I'm the engagement lead for the council's external audit. As the Chair has alluded to, I'm joined today by Will Guest, who has helped complete the audit for this year, and for members of the committee, just to say that will be assuming the audit manager role going forward for 2021 onwards. So in respect of the paper you have in front of you today, just to remind members, we did bring our draft audit findings report to the committee back in November, and at that point we did say that we had a significant amount of work to be completed, primarily in the areas around the valuation of property, plant and equipment, and looking at the investment properties around that and council dwellings. So we have now completed that work, and in the report today, page 3 of our report primarily summarises the work that has been completed since the last meeting. So just to take members through that, we identified 4 cases in council dwellings where we found to be in the wrong valuation, the wrong beacon. I suppose for members who maybe not be fully aware of the valuation process, essentially what the valuer does is will value a sample of properties, put them into an area called beacons, and then if the category of dwelling fits within that beacon, then you essentially use that beacon and you multiply it by the number of properties to get to a valuation in simplistic terms. So we found that there were 4 properties in the wrong beacons. When we've worked that through with officers, that's shown that the valuation of council dwellings could be overstated by up to potentially £341,000. And then also, as part of the audit, when having discussions with officers, it was identified that in relation to investment properties, which have to be valued annually, a valuation had been done on 2 properties, but hadn't then made its way into the accounts. And the estimated error in respect of that was £207,000. Again, an overstatement. So those 2 errors, cumulative impact is just over £500,000 overstatement, and we put it as a long-term assets because it would affect a couple of lines within property, plant and equipment and investment properties. That's not material for our audit, as we reported back in November. To give a true and fair view in respect of a reader of the accounts, we set our materiality at 1.5 million. So management have assessed the misstatements and have determined not to adjust for those. So that's one of the elements we'll be asking the Audit and Standards Committee to agree to today, is where they can concur with management's view that they will not be adjusting for those on the basis of materiality. The other element we did look at in relation to valuations was around the council values its assets on a rolling basis, so every 5, so it goes through a full cycle every 5 years. That always means that there will be an element of the asset base that isn't valued in any one year. And as part of our audit procedures, we challenge officers around how are they satisfied that the valuations of those properties haven't moved significantly since the last valuation that might potentially lead to the valuation in the balance sheet being materially misstated. So we were challenging the council on their approach to that. We were comfortable with the overall approach to council dwellings, but it was identified through those challenge and that conversation that actually we were getting quite close to what might be considered to be a material difference, and therefore the council determined that in order to mitigate that risk, it would value at least one more property in the general fund, and therefore it revalued the museum, and that resulted in the increased valuation of £185,000 in the valuation of the museum, and the accounts have been adjusted to reflect that. So following that, we're satisfied as auditors that any potential movement on the carrying value of the remaining unvalued assets is likely to be in the region of 1.39 million. As far as and our view is that not material, and therefore we're satisfied with the council's estimation methodology. I think what is important though is clearly the audit has been delayed, and we were looking to get it completed by the end of November. Is just bringing to the council members' attention there will be a continued increase in focus upon estimates. There's a change to auditing standards this year. That means that we will need to look further at the assumptions that underpin and the evidence that support them. And a simple reason for today this year has been in obtaining evidence from management to support assumptions. Now, certainly that has been not helped by the pandemic, but there's certain areas around like floor areas of buildings, details of rental streams, and yields on valuations that we've had to work quite closely and the valuer and to get that information out of them. And it's important because this challenge will not go away, and I think our view would be that it's important that the council does look at its arrangements for recording and retaining that information going forward. One, primarily for itself to help in its own record keeping, but also to help in terms of the audit, because I think this challenge around these key assumptions will continue to be a factor of our audits going forward. So those are that's the key things that we've identified in relation to financial statements. In terms of value for money, we did report back in November that we were posting an unqualified value for money conclusion. Since that time, the council has published its budget for 2021-2022. So we have reviewed that and the other relevant papers to determine if there was an impact upon our conclusion. And we are satisfied that our overall conclusion does remain valid. But we have added some paragraphs on onto page 12 that showed where we've come from, where our assumptions and our work has been carried out. And again, reiterating, we do recognise the challenging position that the council is in, and they're not alone in that, and that there will need to be some close management of the position as the council progresses. I think, in terms of, just very quickly, I suppose for councillors, in terms of where some of the main changes are highlighted in the actual report that's changed since you saw it in November. On page 11 is where we picked up the revaluation of council dwellings. On page 12, we pick up the land and buildings valuation. And then actually on page 13 is where we've got the updated figures, which we did report to you back in November, around the material uncertainty that was disclosed within Warwickshire Pension Funds accounts. And therefore, we've highlighted there the impact upon your financial statements and how that links into our opinion. And then, as I was noting, on page 17, it picks up the investment properties. Page 17 and 18 pick up the investment properties. And then the value for money conclusion updated paragraphs are contained on page 30. So I wasn't planning to go into that on page 30. That's drawn significantly from your budget making reports. So, and on page 34 is where the adjustments that I've just mentioned in terms of the revaluation of the museum and the proposed unadjusted misstatements, or that the member management are not proposing to adjust, they're summarised on page 34. Overall, therefore, we're still proposing an unqualified opinion on the council financial statement and an unqualified value for money conclusion. But I'm now happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Grant. Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak on this item?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple brief points about land and values. We've got an ongoing dispute between the borough and the county council over the roads that go round some of our council dwellings. They're currently unadopted and should be maintained by the borough. And I wasn't sure if they were valued, assuming they were actually a liability, because obviously they've not been maintained and there's a dispute as to whether the county should cover the maintenance costs, or whether they've been valued as if the county council is covering the maintenance costs, because cumulatively there's an awful lot of roads. I mean, in my patch we've got Cleaver Gardens, we've got the car parks at the back of Ryde Avenue, and because of the understanding that we could offload the ownership of these roads to the county, that they've not been maintained for some time. So it would be useful if the auditors would actually make sure that it doesn't get forgotten as either a liability for being unadopted roads owned by the county, or something else goes wrong. And the second point I just wanted to make is I'm always concerned about the value of the NAB cell properties we bought. Very keen, we can get rental income, but obviously the value of properties can go down, particularly if they're rented out and their condition deteriorates over time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I thank you to the councillor for pointing out the roads element. I would need to check. I would imagine at the moment, and Craig, you may have a view on this, is that normally roads are treated as infrastructure assets. But I would need to check within the HRA, but it is useful to know. And if they're infrastructure assets, they're at historic costs, so they wouldn't, in that sense, be revalued. So they'd be in there at whatever they got brought onto the balance sheet. But it is useful to know that if there is a potential for their valuation, or is a potential for, if they are in dispute around ownership, that is useful as auditors to know, and we will pick that up as part of our planning for 2021. And I think probably just secondly on the NAB cell properties, they would be treated as investment properties within the company. They should be revalued on an annual basis. And I think, as you've shown here, in the adjustments you've seen in this report, investment properties have dropped slightly. But again, they need to be valued on an annual basis. And clearly the pandemic will make any valuations of such properties, uncertain going forward. Although we'll have to wait and see how the economy maybe comes out of the pandemic. So I don't know if officers have any other comments to make, but that would be my views.
Thank you, Grant. The only thing I was going to say was exactly what you just said about they would be held on our balance sheet as infrastructure assets and would be held at cost unless we had written them out completely at point of transfer. So it's something that we will look at as part of this close down process.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on this report? I see no hands, although my very, very slow today. Right, I see no hands, so Grant, can I thank you and Will for coming along to the meeting this evening?
Chair, I think you do need to have agreement that you're not going to adjust the accounts. Sorry, proposal is management are proposing not to adjust your financial statements as the audits and standards is those charged with governance. They need to confirm that they are comfortable with that decision of management, and it'll also be, I suppose, the letter of representation will need to be signed as well. So I can see Craig's got his hand up, so I'll now hand over back to the officers to take you through that. Sorry.
It was just to state that ideally get the audit findings report is duly noted, and the hopefully if all members are in agreement that the accounts are not adjusted, and if it could also be minuted that the letter of rep as sent to the chair, the vice chair, and the section 151 officer has been duly signed, so we can get that sent off to Grant Thornton.
Okay, right. So the recommendation is that the report from the external auditor is accepted. Does anyone have, again, any comments they wish to make? No. Okay, so Grant, Will, thank you so very much for coming along this evening. And I will, as I always do, Grant, invite you to stay for the rest of the meeting if you so choose. And I don't blame you if you don't want to.
No, it's okay, Chair. I have an interest as your independent review of listening and the rest of the meeting, so I will stay. But thank you for the invitation. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to agenda item 7, which is the internal audit plan 2021-22 and the counter fraud activity. Linda, I believe this is your report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the proposed internal audit plan for 2021-22. We're asking committee to approve. We did have problems in the current financial year because of COVID and had difficulty in completing some audits. So a revised plan was approved by this committee at the meeting in November, and some audits were actually removed from the plan. So I have put those that were removed from this year's plan into next year's plan, and those are marked with an asterisk at the proposed plan in Appendix A. The rest of the plan is really made up of those audits where we've looked at the risk score and the date of the last audit, and they are now due for a further review. We do have some high risk areas where we do some work around those every year, and they're laid out in Appendix A. And also Simone does ask us to put some time aside to carry out some value for money reviews during the year if there are any concerns that are raised. In developing this plan, I have assumed that the problems that we had in completing some audits in the current year won't happen next year as restrictions on lockdown start to be lifted. But if this assumption is incorrect, then I will bring a further report and a revised plan to committee for approval throughout the year. We do follow-up reviews. They're completed 6 to 12 months after the final audit. So in Appendix A, you have a list there of the follow-up reviews that are due next financial year. And then in section 5 of my report, I've set out the work of our counter fraud officer. It's a shared service with ourselves and North Warwickshire. And in paragraph 5.2, I've just done a summary of the number of investigations completed and the savings to the public purse that those investigations have generated during the current financial year up to the end of February 21. So if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Does anyone have any questions that they wish to ask of Linda? I can't see anyone indicating.
Councillor Evans has his
Sorry,
hand up.
yes, sorry. Councillor Evans, yes. Councillor Evans.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As always, I think that we will have to send a thanks to our Carlton Ford officer, who is clearly doing a fantastic job. You know, as it's mentioned in the report, there's national savings of just over £600,000. I don't know if that's just across Nuneaton and Bedworth or just Nuneaton, Bedworth or North Warwickshire, but either way, that's a brilliant success. In relation to Appendix A of the report, I just want to go back to not the last committee, but the committee before, where Linda, you presented a report to us about the Civic Hall. Obviously, we requested that you and your team do an internal audit into what was going on into the Civic Hall, and you presented that to us, and you issued the Civic Hall with a limited assurance ruling. If I recall, I'm happy to stand corrected if I was wrong about that. But you know, within that report, we were seeing things about the Civic Hall signing informal contracts. You know, the Civic Hall management deciding to override the council's budget. Yet I see in this internal audit plan that under follow-up reviews, the Civic Hall isn't included. Well, if the Civic Hall has received a limited assurance ruling from you as the internal audit manager, should audit at the council not follow up the Civic Hall with a review just to see that the Civic Hall is improving and carrying out the recommendations that you included in your report, which I have to say I think was a very fair and balanced report. Yes, is there a reason why you haven't included the Civic Hall?
Yeah, just on your first point, the figures in paragraph 5.2 relate just to Nuneaton and Bedworth, not North Warwickshire. And your second point about the Civic Hall, yes, it's still on the agenda, but it's quite difficult to do a follow-up review because it's been closed for the last 12 months. It's now a vaccine centre. All the staff have been redeployed to other jobs. So to go in and actually do a follow-up audit is quite difficult at the moment, but we will certainly do one when we're able to go in and do it. We haven't forgotten.
I think my concern is, and I do appreciate what you're saying, in that the Civic Hall is not operating as a entertainment venue, but within that report we were told that the Civic Hall management were overriding the council's adopted budget, that management was signing informal contracts, and I hope you understand that as a councillor I have to raise questions about that, and it clearly is not right if you're issuing a limited assurance ruling, which you don't tend to do. So it's quite rare for a council department to get a limited assurance ruling. So obviously you say that it's on the agenda, so given that this internal plan takes us up to February 2022, I presume, I should it not just be included as a follow-up review, even if it takes place towards the end of the current financial year?
Yeah, I'm happy to add it.
Yeah.
To the follow-up reviews. Yeah.
Chair, could I move that the Civic Hall be included as a follow-up review, included on Appendix A?
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposal?
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. Is there any dissension to that? You're quite happy to do that, Linda, but
yeah,
we still have to bear in mind we don't know how long it will stay as a vaccination centre, which may cause you continue to cause you difficulties. Is there any dissent to that proposal? I see no dissent, so that proposal is carried. Thank you. Right, so I will therefore move the recommendation at 2.1 that the internal audit plan at Appendix A be approved and the work of the counter fraud officer be noted with thanks. Is there a seconder for that proposal, please?
Seconded, Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Is there any dissent to that proposal? I see none, so the proposal is carried. Thank you for your report, Linda, and thank you for the work that your department are doing in very difficult circumstances. That applies to almost all departments, I suspect, but thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so moving on to agenda 8, the Treasury Management Monitoring Report. Craig, I believe this is your report.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Right, I'll take you through, in as brief as I possibly can, what's happening with the Treasury situation. Interest rates are still very low. 0.1% have been for quite a while now, and we're not expecting them to change for the next few years. So we're not expecting investment returns to be that good for the foreseeable future. The table for the current investment position at the end of December shows that we've got about £43 million invested, but we are expecting that to drop to about 28 million by the end of the financial year. 5.4 shows that there's a lot of cash invested in very low interest in our money market funds and bank at the end of December. It was approximately 20 million compared to the total invested at 40 odd million. Some of that invested is actually at 0% in our current account, and one of our money market funds is at 0%. This is in part due to the severe lack of appetite from banks and building societies for taking cash at that time. And where they did make an offer, it would have actually cost us more to transfer the cash to them than the return we'd have got from an investment. So we took the decision to say, let's use our money market funds, which are AAA rated, save on the transaction cost. And yes, we're not going to get a great return, but at least we've got our money liquid and secure. We also needed to manage liquidity because we've got payments going out to businesses from lockdown grants and the track and trace payments to individuals. So we needed to make sure we've got liquid cash as well. Both of our benchmarks are actually negative if you look at that table at minus 0.1%, as the markets were still pricing in negative rates, but the Bank of England have said it won't happen just yet, if it does at all. The table at 519 shows the average return for our investments for the first 9 months of the year, and we're well ahead of the benchmarks there, but returns are continuing to drop as our older deposits are dropping out through natural immaturity, and there's no new opportunities available at the moment. The property fund is starting to recover, which is good news. We did see shock on the valuation there after Brexit and COVID, but the table at 523 shows that we are seeing capital gains there, and it is slowly recovering, which is good news. You will recall as well that there's a statutory override for the changes in capital value for 5 years, and the table at 529 shows what returns would have been if that override hadn't been in place. Would still be positive, and it would still be better than the other investments, but the fact that we've got the override in place means that we are getting better returns at the moment, net return. Investment and debt activity for Q3 shown at 531 and 532. There's not a lot of activity there, as I said, because there's not been much in the markets. And our underborrowed position is actually increasing because we've had some natural debt maturities. It's manageable at the moment in the short term, so I'm not concerned with that. Our cash flows are sufficient to maintain that, but we are monitoring the borrowing rate so we don't miss out on having to borrow in the future at a higher borrowing cost. The revenue forecast at 535 shows we've got some savings due to the underborrow position and better returns on some of our investments. And the prudential indicators are shown in section 6, and there's no areas of concern there. So that's all I've got to say, and happy to take any questions, Councillor.
Thank you, Craig. Does anyone have any questions on this particular agenda item 8 on this report? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Craig, as always, thank you for your detailed report to the committee. I've got a question relating to Bank of England interest rates, and there's been some speculation that the Bank of England may impose negative interest rates, although I know that would be a decision made by the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, not the Treasury. Have our Treasury advisors, the Link Group, given any indication as to when the Bank of England are likely to set their next interest rates? Are we forecasting for that potential decision?
Okay, the link forecast assumes that there won't be any increase or even a decrease for the next 3 years on the Bank of England rate. So it'll be maintained at 0.1. There is a risk, an outside risk, that yes, it could go negative, but the Bank of England actually surveyed all of the major institutions and their systems could not have coped with a negative interest rate. So they've actually stated that, as at the December meeting, that for the next 6 months, they wouldn't even consider going into negative territory. Link Group have said it's unlikely, as I say, but it is still a risk. If the markets did price that in on investment returns, it wouldn't be a return. Effectively, we'd be paying for people to have our cash.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to know if there was any speculation as to when they would, but obviously if they're forecasting that they're not going to be making a decision until in the next 3 years, then okay.
Yeah, the link meet on a monthly basis after the MPC meet each month, review the minutes, assess what's happening with the marketplace, economic forecasts wider than just their own assumptions, and actually make a judgment. And they're of the view that we won't see any movement in bank rate for, like I say, the next 3 years.
Okay. Thank you, Craig.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sonola.
Thanks, Chair. Just a minor one on 5.4. Now, the net debt. Are we, Craig? Are we now in a position now to actually give us what will be the estimate for the year ending this current year?
It's too early. I haven't got the information what the current year is, but obviously, as at the end of December, our average return was 0.45. So for the first 9 months, that's what we got. It will be lower. I can definitely say it will be lower, especially as we're seeing nil return on our current account, very, very low, if not nil, on our money market funds. And as the fixed term deposits actually mature and our certificates of deposit mature, any opportunities that we've got to go back out are at very, very, very low rate. So it will be low. We will be ahead of benchmark. I can be confident of that. But yes. It will certainly be dropping.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more speakers, so could I formally move the recommendation at 2.1 that the committee note the report? Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. I'll move to the vote. I can see no dissension, so that recommendation is carried. Thank you very much, and thank you for your report, Craig.
Thank you, Chair.
So if we can move on to item 9, which is the SIP for Financial Management Code. Simone, I think this is your report.
It is, thank you, Chair. So this report updates members of the committee on progress in achieving compliance with SIP's Financial Management Code. And the Financial Management Code provides guidance for effective and sustainable financial management for local authorities and helps provide assurance that local authorities are managing resources effectively. At 3.2, I've set out the key standards in the code, those bullet points, and they are responsibilities of the CFO, or the Chief Financial Officer, and the leadership team, governance and financial management style, long to medium term financial management, the annual budget, stakeholder engagement and business plans, monitoring financial report performance, and external financial reporting. The first full year of compliance with the code is 2021-22, but SIPFA has acknowledged that in the light of COVID-19 pandemic that local authorities are under an enormous amount of pressure at the moment, and has concluded that whilst they still intend for full compliance to remain as 21-22, they are accepting that a more flexible and sort of proportionate approach will need to be in place just to reflect that burden on local authorities. And that they do acknowledge that in some areas it may be a direction of travel that we need to demonstrate in terms of compliance towards the code. What I have then done at Appendix A is set out each of the standards and each of the actions underneath those standards, with an assessment of what our current status in relation to that standard is, any further work that's been identified, and then a status. Members will see from that appendix that all bar one of those standards I've assessed as green. There are some minor improvements that are suggested to sort of bolster our efforts in this, but on the whole, they are green. The only area that I've assessed as amber is under standard 6, which is monitoring financial performance. And the standard suggests that the leadership team, or management team in our case, should monitor the elements of its balance sheet that pose a significant financial risks to sustainability. And I have suggested that our team will develop processes to monitor those key balance sheet items and report those to management team through our budget monitoring processes. So we will be doing that during 21-22. Hence why I've assessed that one as amber. All the other ones I've assessed as green. So the recommendations are for the committee to note that assessment. So I shall leave it there, but obviously happy to take any questions or queries on this, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Condacore, I think you wish to speak on this item.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a little bit on, I mean, it's quite useful, the table in the back with all the, page 43, etc. And one area I'm always concerned about is the chaos of creating a budget and doing it all early. And there's quite a bit about consultation about how budgets will be done, and also the monitoring side of it. Because at the county, we have it's like almost like a restaurant menu. You have a whole lot of budget items you could do in all the parties, and then you sort of work more collaboratively in creating budgets, I think. And I think obviously the council's in a difficult position with COVID, but I do think we can do the budget setting process a lot better, and a lot more input from the public. I mean, take the litter bin proposal I made. I think if we had a better way of working in terms of working up budgets, a fairly non-controversial thing that could be funded from a little bit of spare cash could have actually got through the budget process. But the way it all gets done as a big budget, and it's hard to amend and see what's available. I'm not saying this very well, but you understand the gist of it. I think some work to actually make budgets work better, and also so much of the budget is already done in November and it goes through cabinet as urgent items. I don't think that's a very good process in terms of input. And the final point is scrutiny. On Thursday we got this giant scrutiny report. I don't know if it will show on or the for the internal scrutiny, and buried in there is our OSC monitoring finance. And that is all tied in with a massive report on about 100 pages of libraries and parking and whatever. And I think we do need to do a better job of scrutinising finance to be more timely, and also to have it as a separate item, the finance part. Because I don't think when Philip or whoever officer is doing it, because we're doing it all as an en bloc, we don't get enough scrutiny. So I think to improve the standard of scrutiny for finance, we should actually break out the finance stuff and have it as a timely, short, separate report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did you want to comment, Simone?
Not in any particular way, Chair. Obviously, we have said in the table that we will consider further public consultation as part of future budget setting processes. OSPs, of course, do have in the Constitution the right to consider draft budget proposals, and we do always include that in the draft budget report to Cabinet, that OSPs can consider draft proposals and make recommendations.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this report? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a brief comment, if I may, on page 43 under monitoring financial performance. It says the leadership team takes action using reports enabling it to identify and correct emerging risks to its budget strategy and financial sustainability. The leadership team monitors the elements of its balance sheet that pose a significant risk to financial sustainability. And Simone, tell me if I'm talking absolute nonsense here, but would you not agree with me that that is a responsibility of all employees of the council, not just the the leadership team to raise potential issues in our budgetary strategy. You know, for example, if a junior officer's, comes to the view that 6 months down the line, I feel that, a certain part of the council may be about to breach its budgetary strategy, what mechanism is in place for that junior officer to approach you as the Section 151 officer?
So the way that our financial management arrangements work, Councillor Evans, is that we have budget holders at different levels of the authority. Quite often they will be heads of service, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they are at sort of team leader level, and it's that budget holder's responsibility to ensure that their budgets are managed appropriately and they've got the appropriate controls in place. If they identify any issues, then they certainly would escalate that to the director, that then would escalate it or raise it at management team if necessary. But it is in the job descriptions of those budget holders that they have got that responsibility over their individual budgets, and to make sure that their budgets are spent appropriately and the controls are in place.
And you're directly responsible for those budget holders as Section 151 officer?
Well, obviously the directors of that make up management team all also have budget responsibility, but the overall financial management of the authority is the Section 151 officer, along with the leader of the council and cabinet as well. But yes, it is the Section 151's overall responsibility. But all directors have budget management also in their job descriptions to give them that responsibility over their service areas as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? I see none. So could I move the recommendation at 2.1 that the committee note the report and the assessments against the Financial Management Code as set out at Appendix A? Is there a seconder for the proposal?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Does anyone wish? We have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation. Is there any dissent? I see none. So the recommendation is carried. Thank you. So we will move to agenda item 10, which is the proposed new code of conduct for elected members. I think this is you, Philip.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a report that has been through the Constitution Review Working Party. So there are recommendations in the report that have been considered by the Working Party. Just by way of outline, members will remember a number of reports have been brought to this committee, starting with the report that was undertaken by the Committee on Standards in Public Life, and arising from that, a number of other actions flowed, not least the suggestion in their model standards that a more uniform code be established across the whole of the local government sector. The LGA took this up as a proposal and has been working to produce a model code, and last December they published the final code. We did bring the consultation version to this committee during the course of last year, and the final version has now been produced, which is the one that is appended to the report. In the report itself, well, I should say that the expectation from the LGA is that they would like to have a degree of uniformity across the local government sector, and that is principally because it does create some issues, certainly for twin hatters who may be on two councils and therefore faced with having to comply with two different codes that might say quite different things. So the intention behind the proposal is to try and have a more standard code. Having said that, the LGA, when they produced the code, did say that it would be permissible for local flavour to be brought to a code. So if there were particular things that the local authority felt was necessary to include in the code, it could, but the generality of it would be preserved as a model standard. In the report, Chair, at 4.4, there is reference to one of those things where we would be bringing a local flavour, and this ties in with a report later on the agenda in connection with the Register of Gifts and Hospitality. The proposal in the model code is for the limit for gifts, declarable gifts, to be set at £50. Our current proposal, and the proposal that was supported by the working party, is that we retain the £20 limit, and so that is part and parcel of the proposals before you. Moving on to 4.5, there is a little bit of an issue in terms of the wording of the code, in terms of the impression, the reference to impression that's in the code as to when the code applies. For those members who are longer in the tooth, they will remember the Livingston case and the discussions that ensued around that time, that the code should only apply when a member is actually acting, and that was then replicated in the Localism Act, which you have in paragraph 4.5. So there is a proposal there that we add that those words, that when they are acting in that capacity, it still requires a forensic assessment of any given circumstance as to whether or not the member is acting in that capacity, but it does keep it in line with the legislative framework by doing that. And lastly, Chair, the other issue that the working party considered was an issue in terms of the use of council resources for political purposes. There is a prohibition in the Local Government Act 1986 that says that local authority assets shouldn't be used for political purposes. And again, we'll be talking about that when we come to the report on the publicity standards later on in the agenda. The code as worded is slightly probably broader than it should be, and I think the view is that there may be a change in legislation that might give this some credence at some point, but it's certainly not going to happen in the near future. So the proposal is to reword that paragraph B in paragraph 4.6 that you have there, to delete and add those words. The words added are those underlined, and the ones deleted are the ones that are struck through, just to make it clear that the words likely to facilitate or be conducive to have been taken out, as the feeling is that that's probably too broad and could mislead members into committing a breach of the 1986 Act. Those are the sort of the main headlines there, Chair, in terms of the code. The intention would be to, subject to the committee agreeing to adopt the code or approve the code, would be to then refer it to Council for formal adoption and incorporation into the Constitution. And I should say, Chair, that part of the process also needs to involve discussions with our neighbouring councils, because we are working alongside the other monitoring officers across Warwickshire in order to ensure that we do achieve a sort of commonality across the whole piece, simply to achieve that ultimate goal of having a model standard that members can work to. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, but broadly that's the discussion that we had at the working party.
Thank you. Councillor Condacore, you wish to comment?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of points. One is, obviously people have several hats on, and the issue quite often is there's almost like complaints tourism. If you're a multi-hatter, where people could complain about you to any council they feel like, if it's not tied to something you're doing in your job. And particularly as a parliamentary candidate, and I may be a parliamentary candidate in the future, if I'm talking, like, for example, about the American election and Trump's impeachment, I do think it needs to be made quite clear that members of the public can't complain to me, to my council, if I'm talking about international politics and I'm also potentially a parliamentary candidate. There has to be some link back to it, and I think some clarification that I'm not a councillor in everything I say politically, because I say me and many other people do talk about politics generally. And the second thing, we still have an outstanding issue as to where we're going with appeals or anything in terms of standards. And obviously, this council and others have had problems in the past. And it'd be useful to know if one day we're going to get back to some form of an appeal system for people who disagree with outcomes of standards processes. Thank you, Chair.
Philip, do you want to reply?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the certainly in terms of appeals, that is something that the Committee on Standards in Public Life put to government in its recommendations, that in addition to looking at the issue of sanctions and the need for effective sanctions, as you know, when the Local Act was brought in, it didn't actually deal with the issue of sanctions. The recommendation from the Committee on Standards in Public Life is that the government need to legislate to reintroduce some sanctions. As part of that process, they also recognise that in introducing sanctions, you needed an appeal process. So the recommendation was that the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman would act as an appellate body to deal with any complaints or appeals. So it certainly, I envisage that if we get to the point of sanction, then we will get to the point of appeal. But as it currently stands, there is no suggestion in terms of the arrangements that have come from the Local Government Association that there would be any automatic right of appeal against any decision. So ultimately, the hearings panel would be the final arbiter on any standards issues currently.
Thank you, Philip. Is there, I have to say that I was at a combined authority audit and standards meeting only a couple of weeks ago where this very similar document was discussed, and certainly across the delegates who were there from different authorities, there was certainly a wish for as many authorities as possible to follow the guidelines so that it gave some consistency to the rules. There was also comments made at that meeting about the wish for, again, as Mr. Richardson says, to talk about sanctions and also about the effects of social media. And the combined authority said that they had every intention of making those points in their submission. So are there any further points that anyone wishes to raise on this item? I don't see any hands going up.
June,
Councillor Phillips has his hand up, Chair.
Councillor, sorry, Councillor.
No, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, although I welcome the changes and the recommendations and what work that the working parties have done, do we need to move so quickly if we are looking for uniformity with other districts and say the county? Is there, are we doing things a bit quickly, or is it a case that further information will come back to the working party over the year, whereby we might have to make more changes, Philip?
Well, as I said, it's a fair point. We are endeavouring to work in tandem alongside our colleagues across the county. I believe the County Council will be considering something towards the end of this month, maybe with their own local flavour in terms of the content of the code. I do know, and we are meeting to discuss where we are to try and keep us in tandem as we all move towards adoption. I am aware, not so much in Warwickshire, but in some other areas, that there is some scepticism about the code, and some areas are suggesting they may not go down this road, but I think the view is that ultimately there is a desire for the uniformity, just so we know where we stand. I do know that Stratford are looking at this, and Warwick District, North Warwickshire and Rugby. So I anticipate that if anything does develop, yes, we would bring it back to the working party if need be for review and consideration. My own view is that it's more likely that the changes that we will be making will probably be as a result of legislation. The chair of the Committee on Standards in Public Life has pointed out to the Under-Secretary of State that it's now getting up to nearly 2 years since their report was published. And they're still waiting for the government to respond to their recommendations. So I think a gentle, polite reminder was sent, I think in January, I think it was this year, just to chivvy them along and say what is happening. I think the general view is that government is obviously preoccupied with other matters, more pressing matters, certainly with the pandemic. So I think there is it'll take its turn, but I would anticipate that the bigger changes that we would need to make will come later on down the line, once the government has had time to create some parliamentary time to be able to consider the legislative changes to deal specifically with issues like sanctions.
Thank you very much, Philip, and I welcome the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, what did you say, Councillor Phillips? Moving the did you say you were moving?
I welcome the recommendations.
Welcome it.
Quite happy to move them if you wish.
Okay, so the recommendation 2.2 subjects. I'll take 2.1 first, is that the proposed members of Code of Conduct at Appendix A be approved, which Councillor Phillips has moved. Is there a seconder for that proposal?
I'll do that, Chair. Councillor Pomfrey.
Thank you. So is there anyone who is, I will move to a vote on that one. Is there anyone? I don't see any dissent. So I will move then, and I will move 2.2, which was subject to 2.1 above, that it be recommended to Council that 2.2.1, the Code at Appendix A, be adopted, and 2.2.2, the Constitution, be amended accordingly.
I'll second that too again, Councillor.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishes to speak, or are there any dissent from that recommendation? I see none, so that then is carried. Thank you. So we move on to agenda item 11, which are recommendations from the Constitution Review Working Party. Do you want to present the report, Philip, please?
Yes, Chair. Again, as some members of the committee will know, as members of the Constitution Review Working Party, the Working Party has reviewed the gifts and hospitality policy and produced a revised version, which is set out at Appendix A of the report that you have before you. There's nothing of substance in terms of the changes, other than that there has been a slight reordering and some definitions added into the policy, and specifically, I wish we could do this for members as well, but I don't think we can because of the technology. But we've now created a hypertext link from the policy so it can be on the internet, on the council's website, and then officers can then use that to make declarations. And I understand that when they use that, it will automatically then go on to the register, where we will be looking at what we can do for elected members going forward once we've finished upgrading our IT systems. In the meantime, I'm afraid you still have to use the form that is also appended to the policy until such time as we can set it up so that you've got that automated version. The other policy that you have before you is the protocol for member-employee relations. It's a very simple change. The committee approved an amended version of the employee code of conduct a couple of years ago, and when this particular policy came up for review, it's simply a case of substituting a change that was made in that policy into this policy, where there was a specific extract that was taken out of the last policy and replaced. So this is simply a like-for-like exchange, and that's it. And that's Appendix B. So the recommendations, Chair, are set out in Section 2 of the report for approval and for recommendation to Council that we update the Constitution to reflect those changes. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Are there anyone wish to comment? No. So therefore, as chair of the Constitution Review Working Party, I will move the recommendations at 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. Moving, unless there are any further speakers, I will move to the vote, and I see no speakers, so the recommendation is agreed. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 12, which
Chair,
is...
just before we carry on, I've been asked if you will want to take any breaks during the meeting this evening, as with council, or are we going straight through?
I will be taking a comfort break in probably round about 15 minutes.
Thank you, just for me to keep an eye on the time for you.
Yeah, okay. Agenda 12, the guidance for members on the use of social media and the media protocol. I believe Ian Andrew is with us, is he not, Philip? And is he presenting this report?
It's a double act, Chair. Ian will be dealing with the media protocol. I'm just going to very quickly skip over the social media guidance, principally to say that the social media guidance is simply, it's based on the old guidance that was produced by the Standards for England, and we've always meant to incorporate it into the Council's Constitution members' information. So we've brought it here following discussion at Constitution Review Working Party to achieve just that. So the intention there is simply to reflect that guidance in the Constitution. And then I'm just going to hand over to Ian, because Ian is the architect, if you like, of the media protocol, which is also attached as an Appendix B. So over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Chair. Not a double act that's going to prosper on the stage, I don't think. But I won't go through the media relations protocol. The documents in front of you, the recommendation is to approve the document for your use. I just point out that the idea of the media protocol is that we've got a clear process for ensuring clarity in the council's dealings with media, to enable members of the public to see the portfolio holder that's responsible for decision making and budgets in each key area of council activity. The document before you mirrors similar documents in place in local authorities across the country. It's produced in line with national guidance that I think you're going to have a look at next, to the Code of Recommended Practice for Local Authority Publicity. And it's also a very important tool for the corporate communications team in getting their day-to-day job done. So no wish to comment further, Chair, unless I can assist members on any matter.
Does any member have any questions they'd like to ask of Philip or Ian? Okay, thank you. So I will therefore move the recommendations at 2.1 and 2.2 to approve the social media guidance attached at Appendix A and to approve the media protocol attached at Appendix B. Is there a seconder for the proposal?
I'll do that, Councillor Pomfret.
Thank you. Is there any, it has been proposed and seconded, is there any dissension to the recommendation? Okay, thank you. So that is carried. Moving on then to agenda item 13, which is the Code of Recommended Practice on Local Authority Publicity. Philip.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We always bring this at this time of year, just before the election, simply in case there's any changes that need to be reported, or whether any members require clarification of anything in connection with the Code of Practice. What you have before you in the appendix is, in fact, the existing code that we have, which is in the Constitution, and there's no proposal to change anything. I think we've deleted a date that was in there from 2011-12, but I think that's about it. Probably the only thing to say about the code is, and again, it's really for clarity, there is a code that's been published by the Local Government Association, which you can access on their website. You'll see, if you look at that they have a date when PERDA commences of I think it's the 30th of March. And you'll see that in the case of this report that we're saying that PERDA will start on the 19th of March. The reason for that is quite simply because PERDA starts when you publish the notice of election, and we will be publishing the notice of election for the Borough Council elections and the PCC elections and the county elections across the whole of the county on the 19th of March, which is this Friday. So we will be going into the what we call the PERDA period, but effectively the constraints on local authority publicity will kick in as of Friday, and Ian will be notifying all members. Of course, we will send out a note to all members, and also all senior officers and other officers that would need to know that they, from Friday, will need to be very careful about what they publish in terms of press releases and things, to take account of the Code of Publicity. As it says, it's a period of heightened sensitivity, and as a result, we have to be very careful in what we do, so as not to show political partiality one way or another. So, Chair, it's really for noting, but also to inform members and officers that the code will be coming into effect as of Friday.
Thank you. Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak on this item?
Just one brief thing that happens every election is just before the election, we obviously have a bunch of press releases that are rushed out to make sure that they're not delayed by 2 months. And the problem is a lot of the press take a week to actually run the story. So we do end up having the situation when we do get these stories that are Councillor X is going to do X, or we're going to rebuild Y, or in the PERDA period because of the lead-in. So I do hope the council is taking note of that and not actually releasing anything on Thursday that would then appear next week in the press as they take time to write the stories. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll take Councillor Evans before I ask Mr. Richardson to reply. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 points, so I'll ask my first question and then Philip can come in with your permission. With respect to council land and council assets, is it appropriate for elected members or members seeking re-election to use council land and assets for election purposes?
Interesting question. That will depend. There is provision, and I'm trying to think which bit of legislation. I think it's the Representation of the People Act that says that council premises can be used for public meetings, usually halls and things like that. So it will depend upon what you mean by a council asset. I certainly wouldn't expect us to be holding public meetings in the communal area of a sheltered complex, simply because that's somebody's front room effectively. But certainly in terms of the ability to use some council assets, yes, that is actually specifically mandated in legislation.
Okay, if I'm more specific, could I therefore ask, is it appropriate to use walls, as in outdoor walls, for election literature, to put electoral literature onto walls and buildings owned by the council?
That might depend upon the building concerned. The generality is no. If it's a council building, it shouldn't have political literature on it. If it's a private residence, in other words, if it was a council property or a council flat, then obviously slightly different rules apply, because of course if somebody wants to put something in their window saying, vote whatever, that's outside of our control, because of course that's not classed as council property. It's obviously in a sort of third party control. So that, and of course there's an element of freedom of speech that would come in there. So that would be legitimate to do. But if it's a council building, or it's not part of a, if you like, a private residence, then no, that shouldn't happen.
Okay. Chair, one more question, if I may, in relation to 5G7K advice for officers, re-election. The communications team must avoid mentioning any member who is seeking re-election. Well, the definition of avoid is to keep away from or stopping oneself from doing something. Should that not be reworded to say the communications team must not mention any member who is seeking re-election?
I don't know whether Ian wants to comment on that.
I mean, avoid is open to interpretation.
Ian, do you want to comment on that particular item?
I wonder if I do. I'm trying to think of circumstances in which it might be necessary. I can only think of quite exceptional circumstances in which it might be necessary, and that might be the reason why the wording isn't as clear as Councillor Evans suggests. I can't assist you any further.
Chair, if I could just
yes,
come in, thank you, Chair. Just to help Ian out a little bit, if you just refer to, I think it's item J on the same page, or just slightly above, it kind of supports what Ian's just said, actually, that there may be it's common practice to avoid quoting any members unless in an emergency crisis situation when the relevant portfolio holder or leader will be quoted, although it does then say unless they're up for election. But as Ian said, I think there will just be some very, very exceptional circumstances where there may be a very limited number of cases where we might need to quote the portfolio holder, but they would be very much the exception, I think, rather than the rule.
Okay, thank you. Do you want, Councillor Condicore made some comments earlier, Mr. Richardson, do you want to reply to those?
Well, actually, I was hoping Ian might, because it was in connection with the press release has been released at the last minute and then tripping over into the purdah period. So I don't know whether Ian wants to comment on, if you like, the timing of press releases and what we can do about that.
Yeah, very, very glad to. So first of all, it's important to consider the pre-election period restrictions that apply to the actions of the council, not the actions of media. So if they publish stories that have been put out before the period starts, during the period, there's no fault on their part in that. the work of the corporate communications team is very much to ensure that the pre-election period is observed. So if there are matters that still need to be issued before the period begins, we've just got a couple more days to take that action. The important thing is that after the period kicks in, no publicity is issued at that point. So Councillor Condicourt is quite right. In order to make sure matters are dealt with and the slate is cleared before the pre-election period starts, sometimes you do see matters brought forward and press releases issued in time to avoid breaching the guidelines, but the purpose of doing so is to ensure that pre-election period remains clear of publicity that names councillors.
Thank you for those responses. Is anyone else wishing to speak? No. Therefore, then, can I move the recommendation at 2.1 that the implications of the publicity protocol in Appendix A be noted, and 2.2, all councillors and officers be informed of the start of the PERDA period and its implications on council publicity. Is there a seconder for that proposal?
I'll second that. Go on.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? If not, could I ask if there is any dissent to that proposal? Doesn't seem to be, so therefore the proposal is carried. And thank you all very much for your help and assistance, Ian, and for coming along and discussing it with us. As I said earlier, I do intend to call a comfort break just at the moment, and we will, so I'm adjourning the meeting. We will return at 6:35. Thank you. Not available, right. Thank you. So we will move on to agenda item 14, which is any other business. I have been asked 2 questions, which are being taken as urgent items of any other business. The first question is Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Could the chair of the Audit and Standards Committee please advise me on how she decides the composition of local hearing panels? Could she outline why some panels have been comprised of 2 Labour members and 1 Conservative member, whilst other panels have comprised of 2 Conservative members and 1 Labour member? With reference to the licensing committee, when a subcommittee meeting is called, officers invite all members to attend. Should this not be the case with local hearing panels?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Firstly, I would say I will respond to you and say I do not decide the composition of local hearing panels. But thank you for your question.
Supplementary question, Chair. Could I please ask the chair of the Audit and Standards Committee which officer in the council decides on local hearing panels?
Councillor Evans, would you please allow me, with respect of speaking and not being interrupted? Thank you. I will respond to your question. I do not decide the makeup of a hearing panel. As stated in the Constitution, the composition of the local hearing panel consists of members of the Audit and Standards Committee. Committee services officers will liaise with committee members and officers in agreeing a date for the hearing panel and setting out the meeting. The hearing panel can consist of a mixture of Labour, Conservative or Independent party members. And this will, from the members of the committee, and this will depend on members putting their names forward to committee officers and confirming their availability. if there are any issues with member availability, dates and times of the meetings that may arise from time to time. Officers will consult with me as chair of the committee on these matters as necessary, but I have not ever been called upon in relation to that comment. Thank you.
Supplementary question.
No, I'm sorry, Councillor Evans. This is, as it is in a full council meeting, you ask a question and I respond to you. There is no debate.
I just want a supplementary question.
No, sorry, I said, Councillor Evans, there is no debate. Thank you. I will move on to the next question, which was from Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question here is, could the chair of the Audit and Standards Committee inform me how the council's legal department administers complaints against councillors, and if there's a process in place to ensure consistent practice in dealing with such complaints? I noticed that complaints against councillors in this authority are not necessarily dealt with in the order that they're submitted, and more specifically, I would like to know why some complaints seem to be pushed through the system quicker than others. In particular, I noticed that some complaints have taken more than 12 months to be dealt with.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Brown. However, I will respond to you. It is correct to say that as chair of Audit and Standards, I take no part in the complaints process other than when a confidential item is brought before the committee, which is only if a complaint is deemed to be a breach of the council's member code of conduct. I, as have other members in the past, question the length of time it has taken some of the complaints to come to a decision, but the reply to your question is that the council's procedure for dealing with complaints against elected members is set out in Part 5 of the Constitution. This was approved by Council in July 2012. All complaints are dealt with upon receipt, although the progress of any individual complaint can be affected by a number of factors. Most notably, the staff time to process them, the availability of the independent person, and the complexity of the case. In the more complex cases, there may be the need for the consideration of legal issues related to the complaint, and in some cases, discussions with an external solicitor or monitoring officer. In part, this is to get a second opinion on an issue and whether it is consistent. All cases are prepared by a solicitor in consultation with the independent person before an assessment is submitted to the monitoring officer. There will usually be a discussion between the reporting solicitor and the monitoring officer prior to a final decision on how to deal with the case. Some cases take longer than others for other reasons, most notably whether the case requires a full investigation as opposed to other no action at all, or an informal resolution. The cases that take the most time are those involving formal investigation. These can be protracted due to the availability of witnesses, the complainant or the subject member. The cases that have become protracted are those that are under investigation that have been affected by the pandemic. Due to lockdown and the inability to hold formal meetings, all investigation activity was put on hold and other matters prioritised. Some assessments were externalised to ensure that the backlog of cases could be managed, especially following the raft of complaints after the council meeting in September 2020. The committee considered a report tonight in connection with the revised Code of Conduct prepared by the Local Government Association. The association are also preparing revised guidance on the handling of complaints, which, when produced, will be brought to this committee for consideration. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair.
So